Welcome to Hope Academy. My name is Mr. O, and today I'm going to be specifically going over the questions 25 through 27 from the practice exam 1 on cracksat.net. Feel free to look below in the description to see the exam exactly. But that being stated, usually when I do these questions, I go over them quickly and then I take my time as to how to do this problem or how did I do it so quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. So for this, okay. Okay, so number 25, my final answer is B. And so for this question for number 25, the easiest way to do this question is to remember the vertex formula, okay? And the vertex formula I presented right here when I was solving out the question, which is x equals to negative b over 2a. So I'm going to write that a little more clearly. Negative b over 2a, and what that means is that whenever you have a standard form provided to you, like this question right here is ax squared plus bx plus c, a, b, c, what I can do is that I can use the vertex formula, which helps me find the vertex, which is either the highest or lowest possible point in a parabola. And so for this question right here, right off, my a value is going to be 1 because in front of the x squared, there's an imaginary 1 as the coefficient. And b, for b, it's going to be 5. So I plugged in b as 5, a as 1, and so my final answer is going to be negative 5 over 2. That being stated, if you forget how to do the vertex formula, there is another method in which you can ensure that you can still get to the answer. The way you could do that is that on the calculator, because you are allowed a graphing calculator on this exam, you could punch in this equation, x squared plus 5x, and you could do this on any graphing calculator. You could have it graph out. And so what happens when you let it graph out is that it will show you the parabola, and afterwards what I can do is that I could look using the functionalities and find the minimum for this graph. And there's a function called calculator or whatever not, and I'm going to go to the left hand side, I'm going to go to the right hand side of this, and then it's going to provide me the answer of negative 2.5, which is negative 5 over 2. Thus, how you could get to the answer B. And that concludes my explanation for number 25. To continue on, so I'm going to go ahead and get set up. So since this is two separate pages on here, so okay, go ahead and get started. Okay, number 26. The 20th term is 20. Okay, the 50th term is 100. Okay. What's the first term in the sequence? Oh, interesting. Okay. Okay. 30. Okay. 20 plus 30x equals to 100. 80 equals to 30x. X equals to 8 over 3. Okay. 13 does 19, so 20 minus 19 times. Okay. I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna use a calculator for this. 20 minus 19 times 8 over 3, it's going to be that value, which is something like... Okay, so for number 26, my final answer for this question is B, and now I'm going to explain to you how I was able to get to this answer so quickly. So if you know the equation for arithmetic sequence, you could feel free to use that. Personally for me, I tend to forget the arithmetic or geometric sequence formulas. And so personally for me, there is an easier way you could get to the answer and be able to solve it without having to be reliant on equations. And so when I was doing number 26, for example, the way I did it was that I imagined as if there were certain platforms that do exist for this. So it states that if the 20th term, so I'm going to write 20th term right here, is 20, and then ... it keeps adding and whatever not, and then on the 50th term, it's going to be 100, and then below, they're asking for the first term, ... plus, and then there's a question mark on the first term, okay? And these are not fractions by any means, these are just platforms, quote unquote, of like the first term, 20th term, 50th term, and so on. And they tell you it's a arithmetic sequence, and they're asking for the first term. So right off, the way that I know how to do this question is the fact that between 20 and 100, there's actually a 30 number gap. The way I know that is that I simply know that 50 minus 20 is 30. And I know that they constantly add the same amount. So whatever value, it could be 2, it could be 5, I don't know what it is. I could add it 20 plus that number, plus that number, plus that number. 30 times I have to do this to get to 100. The same way you could write this is by writing the equation 20 plus 30 because 30 of these, platforms or gap that exist times my unknown x will equal to 100 because 30 times do I have to add the same number to get to 100. And so now after I've done this sort of work, what I can do is now solve for x. So I'm going to subtract 20, and then it's going to be 30x equals to 80. And if I divide by 30, and then I'm going to move this up so you can see what I'm doing. Divide by 30, x is going to become 8 over 3. Okay, and so I'm going to leave it like that. I don't need to change the decimal. If you want to, go ahead and do so. Personally, for me, I like leaving it in its original format that I solved it as. Afterwards, I'm not done because this is just the arithmetic, what the value they add every time to it. Afterwards, I need to take this 20 to 20 value and now subtract until I hit the first term. And so 20 minus 1 is 19, which means there are 19 gaps between the first term and 20th term. So I'm going to start at 20 again. Now I'm going to subtract 19 times the 8 over 3 because there's that many gaps. And thus, when I punched into the calculator, 20 minus 19 over 8 over 3 is negative 92 over 3, which equals to, in decimal format, negative 30.6667. And thus, on the paper that I was working on for number 26, my final answer ends up being negative 30.67, the round off value, and thus how I got to the answer of B. And that concludes my explanation for number 26. Now to continue on to the last question. So for number 27, the polar equation are to find the graph of. It's gonna be okay, A. So for number 27, the answer is A. And now I'm going to explain to you how they will get to this answer. For number 27 specifically, the important thing you need to understand is that this is more based on the concept of polar graphs or polar coordinates. It depends on your preference, but I'm just going to write polar coordinates / graphs. So when we are doing these type of equations, the important thing you must remember is that they're all bases on different type of equations. There's no real trick to this per se. One way you could do is to graph it on the calculator by changing it to polar coordinate format and all that. But it does take a little bit of time. That being stated, the best way to do this type of question is just to be able to recognize when certain equations will look like certain polar equation formats. So for example, for this question right here, this equation right off, because I knew r is right next to the sign, told me right off that it was going to be a line. For other examples, such as like a circle, for example, I know right off r has to equal to some sort of formula like a cosine theta or a sine theta, and so these sort of things is just something you need to memorize and be familiar with. But that being stated, this polar concept, you do need to memorize just like a key certain format. How does an equation work? And then connect it to the visual that's based on this. And so for this question, because r sine theta equals to 1, and I knew right off it was going to be just simply a line, and thus how I was able to get to the answer for number 27. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe to our YouTube channel, like our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter so that we could continue to make content like this. I hope you have a wonderful day.